Putin's original plan for the Ukraine war included Belarus. Belarus was supposed to be the northern springboard for Russian offensives toward Kyiv and the western Ukrainian heartland. Belarus was supposed to provide logistics, launchpads, and potentially combat troops. Belarus was supposed to be Russia's multiplier effect. But Ukraine has systematically destroyed this plan, and now Lukashenko is trapped between Moscow's demands and his country's reality. Hey, I'm Natalie Voss. Welcome back to the channel. For those new here, we break down the Ukraine-Russia war through military analysis, satellite verification, and strategic doctrine. We examine how countries actually exercise power and what happens when strategies collide with reality. This video covers how Ukraine locked down the northern border and inadvertently created a political death trap for Lukashenko. Belarus has been part of Russia's strategic calculation since the beginning of the 2022 invasion. On February 24, 2022, when Putin launched the full-scale invasion, Russian forces used Belarusian territory as a staging ground for one of history's most audacious military operations. Russian troops departed from Belarus toward Kyiv in massive convoys. Russian helicopters launched from Belarusian airfields to conduct assault landings at Hostomel airport and strike targets throughout northern Ukraine. Belarus provided the northern vector of Russia's three-pronged assault strategy designed to encircle Kyiv and force Ukrainian capitulation. But Belarus never committed its own ground troops to combat operations. Lukashenko allowed Russia to use Belarusian territory. Lukashenko allowed Russia to stage operations from Belarus. Lukashenko allowed Russian forces to conduct logistics and command operations from Belarus. But Lukashenko did not commit Belarusian soldiers to the fighting. This has been the consistent pattern for 4 years of war. Belarus serves as Russia's rear base and operational sanctuary, but not as an active belligerent nation. The reason is simple political calculation. Lukashenko is politically weak. He has ruled Belarus since 1994 through a combination of authoritarianism and calculated pragmatism. The 2020 election protests nearly toppled him when hundreds of thousands took to the streets refusing to accept his claimed re-election. Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya commanded genuine support among significant segments of the population. Lukashenko's legitimacy is fragile, maintained through security force control and population fatigue rather than genuine popular support. If Lukashenko commits Belarusian troops to Russia's war, he faces multiple catastrophic consequences. First, he makes Belarus a military target. If Belarusian soldiers are fighting Ukrainian soldiers on the battlefield, Ukrainian forces will inevitably strike Belarusian military infrastructure, command posts, and logistics bases in response. Ukrainian drones will penetrate Belarusian airspace. Belarusian civilians will face casualties and destruction. Lukashenko would be inviting war to his territory. This creates domestic political problems. Belarusian society did not support the Russian invasion in 2022. Belarusian society does not support Lukashenko's authoritarianism. Adding "sent our sons to die in Putin's imperial war" to the list of Lukashenko's failures could trigger a domestic uprising that the security forces cannot suppress. So Lukashenko has maintained a careful balance. Support Russia enough to maintain the alliance, but don't commit enough to threaten his regime's survival. This strategy has frustrated Moscow for 4 years. Putin wants Belarus to be a full ally. Putin wants Belarusian troops on Ukrainian soil. But Lukashenko refuses. And Putin cannot force the issue without risking Lukashenko's collapse. In May 2026, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky took a calculated strategic risk designed to make the Belarus problem untenable for both Lukashenko and Putin. Rather than ignore the Belarus threat, Ukraine decided to systematically destroy it through military and diplomatic means. Zelensky began a comprehensive campaign involving military operations to degrade Russian capabilities in Belarus, combined with diplomatic pressure designed to isolate Lukashenko and offer him alternatives. On May 25, 2026, Zelensky officially welcomed Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya to Kyiv in an official state capacity. This was not an accidental or casual diplomatic gesture. This was a deliberate, calculated signal with profound strategic meaning. Ukraine was signaling to Lukashenko and the international community that if Lukashenko chooses Russia, if Lukashenko fully commits to Putin's war, Ukraine has a ready alternative. Tsikhanovskaya represents the Belarusian opposition. Tsikhanovskaya represents systemic change. Tsikhanovskaya represents what a post-Lukashenko Belarus could look like. By hosting her officially, Zelensky is saying, if your regime falls, we recognize and work with your successor. Simultaneously, Ukraine has been conducting targeted military operations, specifically designed to prevent Russian forces from using Belarus as an operational springboard. According to Ukrainian military sources cited by independent analysts, Ukraine has been conducting intensive drone surveillance and strikes against Russian military positions forming along the Belarus-Ukraine border region. Ukraine has also conducted strikes against Belarusian territory itself, specifically targeting Russian military installations, ammunition depots, drone production facilities, and logistics infrastructure. These strikes serve a dual strategic purpose. Militarily, they degrade Russia's capacity to launch major offensive operations from Belarus. Every destroyed ammunition dump reduces Russian stockpiles. Every destroyed drone facility reduces Russian reconnaissance and strike capability. Every attacked logistics hub makes it harder for Russia to sustain operations. Politically, these strikes send a visceral message to Lukashenko. Allowing Belarus to be used as a Russian staging ground makes Belarus a target. Every Russian military installation in Belarus becomes a target for Ukrainian retaliation. Every ammunition depot stored in Belarusian territory becomes vulnerable to Ukrainian strikes. The message is unmistakable. Lukashenko's choice to allow Russia to use Belarus has consequences. Those consequences are visible, tangible, and escalating. Lukashenko is now trapped in an impossible strategic situation. He faces pressure from Putin to formally commit Belarus to the war. Russian military planners have conducted joint nuclear exercises with Belarus, involving Putin and Lukashenko participating via video conference in May 2026. This is not a casual gesture. Nuclear exercises involving two heads of state signal that Russia is cementing Belarus into its strategic structure. But commitment to the war creates existential problems for Lukashenko. First, it makes Belarus a military target. If Belarusian troops are fighting Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian forces will strike Belarusian military infrastructure, command posts, and logistics bases. Ukrainian drones will penetrate Belarusian airspace. Belarusian civilians will face casualties and destruction. Second, commitment to the war destroys Lukashenko's diplomatic lifeline. Lukashenko has been conducting secret negotiations with the United States through various diplomatic channels. According to multiple sources, US officials have indicated potential sanctions relief for Belarus in exchange for moving away from Russia. These negotiations could result in economic revitalization for Belarus, sanctions relief on critical industries like potash export, and restoration of international legitimacy. But if Lukashenko commits Belarusian troops to the Russia-Ukraine war, these negotiations die immediately. The United States cannot and will not offer sanctions relief to a country actively fighting Ukraine. Lukashenko's best economic strategy and his commitment to Russia's war are mutually exclusive. Third, and most critically, committing to the war risks Lukashenko's regime. Belarusian society did not support Russian invasion in 2022. Belarusian society does not support Lukashenko's authoritarianism. Adding "sent our sons to die in Putin's war" to the list of Lukashenko's failures could trigger a domestic uprising that the security forces cannot suppress. Lukashenko's regime survives through a combination of security apparatus control and population fatigue. A major war commitment risks shattering that equilibrium. Meanwhile, Putin is applying pressure. Russian military planners openly discuss scenarios involving Belarus as an offensive springboard. Russian military exercises in Belarus are increasing in frequency and scale. Russian rhetoric about threats from the West and the need for Belarus to defend itself with Russian support has intensified. Putin is essentially telling Lukashenko, "Commit to the war, or I will commit you to the war anyway," through proxy pressure, manufactured incidents, or direct orders. Ukraine is responding to this situation with sophisticated diplomacy. By welcoming Tsikhanovskaya to Kyiv, Ukraine is sending a signal to Lukashenko and the international community. If Lukashenko chooses Russia, there is an alternative. If Lukashenko's regime collapses, there is a successor leadership that Ukraine and Western powers recognise. Zelensky is also conducting direct outreach to Lukashenko, offering negotiations and dialogue. But Ukraine's tone has shifted. According to Ukrainian officials, Lukashenko's statements have meant nothing because he allowed Belarus to be used as a staging ground for the 2022 invasion. Ukraine is not negotiating with Lukashenko as an equal. Ukraine is negotiating with Lukashenko as a subordinate of Putin, who might be persuaded to change allegiances. Ukraine has also been conducting military operations specifically designed to demonstrate that Belarus is not a safe staging ground for Russian operations. Every drone facility destroyed in Belarus sends the message: if you allow Russia to position military assets here, those assets will be destroyed. If you allow Russia to operate from here, you will face Ukrainian retaliation. This creates a dilemma for Lukashenko. If he prevents Russia from staging operations from Belarus, Putin will replace him. If he allows Russia to stage operations from Belarus, Ukraine will destroy those operations and make Belarus a war zone. Lukashenko has no good options. What Ukraine has achieved is containment of the Belarus threat. Ukraine has made it extremely difficult for Russia to launch major offensive operations from Belarus. Ukraine has made commitment to Russia's war politically impossible for Lukashenko. Ukraine has created conditions where Lukashenko's best strategy is continued neutrality, even as Putin demands action. The irony is profound. Putin believed Belarus would become a force multiplier. Putin believed that a coordinated Belarus-Russia offensive could break Ukrainian resistance. But Ukraine's military operations against Belarus staging areas and Ukraine's diplomatic pressure on Lukashenko have made Belarus operationally inert. Belarus cannot be used for major offensives. Belarus cannot become a second front against Ukraine. According to intelligence assessments, Russia has considered manufacturing incidents in Belarus designed to justify military escalation. Russia has considered false flag operations near the Belarus-Ukraine border designed to create pretext for deeper military commitment. But Lukashenko's political weakness and Ukraine's diplomatic pressure make even these options dangerous for Russia. If Russia manufactures an incident, it risks triggering Lukashenko's regime collapse. The result is strategic stalemate. Russia wants Belarus as an active belligerent. Ukraine wants Belarus neutralized. Lukashenko wants to survive politically and economically. The intersection of these objectives creates a situation where no major change is possible without catastrophic costs for all sides. What Ukraine has accomplished is subtle but strategically significant. Ukraine has locked down the northern border. Ukraine has made Belarus a liability for Russia rather than an asset. Ukraine has created political conditions where Lukashenko's best option is continued non-commitment to the war. This does not mean the threat from Belarus is gone. It means the threat from Belarus has been managed and contained. Ukraine's military and diplomatic operations have made major offensives from Belarus extremely difficult to execute. More broadly, what Ukraine has demonstrated is sophisticated understanding of hybrid warfare. Ukraine is not just fighting Russia militarily. Ukraine is fighting Putin's entire strategic architecture. Ukraine is attacking Russia's alliances, Russia's strategic depth, Russia's ability to coordinate with subordinate states. If this analysis of strategic containment and political maneuvering mattered to you, if understanding how countries actually exercise power beyond just military force changed your perspective, you should subscribe. This kind of analysis, examining political military strategy, is what we do every week on this channel. We don't do speculation. We examine actual documents, statements, and military operations to understand how strategy really works. If this video taught you something about geopolitics and Ukraine's strategic sophistication that you didn't know before, leave a comment. Tell me what surprised you. The algorithm promotes content based on viewer engagement. Your comment helps this kind of analytical content reach more people who care about understanding how this war actually unfolds beyond just the headlines. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.